From Midwest Paintball. Today I'm doing a review on the die rotor. I'm going to do a drop test and a jam test separately because it takes kind of a while. But to start off, the die rotor, my bad. Once again, I can't talk. The die rotor is really low profile. I mean, not as low profile as the Spire. The Spire sits a little lower. I think sets at 260, but the normal Spires sit a little bit lower. And I don't know, the Spire has its disadvantage. I mean, as a back player, the rotor is the best thing you could have because of this. I will explain over this in a second. I will explain something in a second. But as you can see, it is pretty low profile on a gun. It sits still fairly low. Sorry. It still sits fairly low. It's pretty decent. It's not too far back, but it does kind of sit backward, and I'll explain why in a second. But it's not forward at all. So if you're shooting out the side of your bunker, someone over here in, like, let's say Chicago layout, for example, which is going on next week, Chicago, PSP. If you're at D-side can and you're shooting snake side, and someone at like 50D could see your barrel, they're not seeing the front of your hopper, like you would on a new Pinocchio or maybe even a Prophecy. But you shouldn't have your barrel out that far anyway, but I know some people will, and some people do, and it's just something that does happen, and it won't happen with a rotor, because I know the tip of your hopper would be easier to hit than a barrel, and it would be easier to see too. But besides that, the reason the rotor sits further back is because the loading thing is actually right here, obviously with the feed neck right here. But what this allows is die to put a spring tray right here. And what that does is, so when you put a pod in your rotor, all the paint hits the spring tray and goes forward into the feeding thing, and it fills the hopper better than it would if the feeding thing on a Spire was sitting right under the speed feed. So when you put the pod in, what happens with the Spire, if you don't dip it or if you don't drop your gun for a second, all of it just stops there and until it feeds down, or either you drop your gun and it goes forward on its own. Or actually, you'd have not on its own. You'd have to actually kind of work at it. Not really just drop your gun, but still, compared to a rotor where you just can hold that steady lane while putting a pod in without doing anything to your hopper or doing anything for your hopper, it's a lot nicer than a Spire or a Prophecy, because you do have to do that with Spire or Prophecy. What I do see some pros do is because, well, what I do see some pros do, so they're not dropping their lanes, is they actually just hold the pod there for a long time on their Spire. So by the time that the pod's empty, all the paint that's stopped here by the feeding mechanism is already shot. But what this does is your Spire is only not halfway, but not a quarter way, kind of somewhere in between. Is not always empty. I mean, it just keeps it somewhat full, but it's not as full as you want it to be, and that means that you're taking another pod out almost right away. I mean, with the rotor, you can just shoot, put a pod in, then drop it, and slowly take another one out. And then by the time it's halfway full, you can put another one, hold it for a second, drop it, and it should be fine. This is the V2 Exalt speed feeds I got in today from A&S Gear. The few other things I probably will be doing a review on. But this is a new Exalt speed feed. So that is that. When I do my drop test next, you will see the speed feed kind of, though some of the balls kind of stop, but that's because of the speed feed. I promise you it doesn't normally happen, and I'll actually probably show you twice with two different rotors, just to prove to you that it's just a speed feed. Besides the fact that it's low profile, I mean, it has no problem feeding whatsoever. It can feed 12.5 or 10 balls per second. Any hopper can. I mean, people are like, ooh, do a drop test, I want to see how fast it feeds. Really, if the hopper can keep up with your gun at 12.5 balls per second on ramp, most people can actually get their gun faster on semi. So when I do a drop test, like a feed test on my gun, I'll actually do semi, because I will eventually with a few different hoppers that I'm going to borrow, or when have friends over, we're going to do it together, but whatever. It's just, if you can keep up with your gun at 12.5 balls per second, you're fine, because if you're D1, you go semi-pro, whatever, you're still fine, because then your gun shoots 10 balls per second, which is easier. Yeah. So besides the fact that it's low profile, it feeds just fine with any tournament gun, tournament marker. It will feed with any pump marker, anything, or even a mechanical Yeah. The ano, or not the ano one, these like the graphics, because it's not metal. It'd be considered graphics. Does eventually wear. I mean, I've had this hopper for quite a while, and as you can see, I don't play snake a whole lot, so this is going to take longer for me to wear on my hopper than it would someone else. But as you can see, it does wear eventually. And I can actually show you guys, and then drop test, before the drop test, I have a snow camo hopper that I had before this one that I literally almost completely, the side of it's gone. It's just white, and it's pretty beat up, but it works. It still works fine. That's the thing. It still works fine. So I mean, they're durable. You pretty much can't stop them. I mean, Dye has a torture test. I'm not gonna be doing a torture test because I have to use this thing, and I don't get hoppers for free like Dye does, because they literally just make them, or like a pro would, because they just get them. So I'm not gonna do a torture test. I have seen a few people besides Dye do it, but what Dye did is they dunked it in water. It was still running in the water, out of the water, still running, and while running, they heated it up. Not directly. They didn't put a blowtorch directly to it, but from a distance, just heated it up, and heated the battery compartment from about right here with the blowtorch, or maybe right here with the blowtorch, and it still worked perfectly fine. They put it back together, and they literally, the dude, it looked about as hard as he could, slammed it on the ground. It still worked perfectly fine, didn't break everything. So these things are pretty hard to break. I know prophecies are super easy to break, so comparing it to a prophecy, it's so much more durable, because literally off break with the prophecy, you can just come up and the front of it might just go flying off. I've seen it happen, and I know it's happened to people before, and I know people that it's happened to. With a Spire, the lid's easy to break. I know if you slammed it on the ground like you would in a Dye torture test, the lid would eventually break, or the thing that holds the speed feed would eventually break. So it's probably the most durable high-end hoppers or loaders, electronic loaders. So that's a good thing. So now I'm going to do the drop test and the jam test. I'm going to show you guys a few different rotors for that. So stay tuned, go watch those. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys for the drop test. Thank you.